Fade in on the endless expanse of the Sahara, where golden sands stretch toward a horizon that promises infinity. A lone herder guides his camels across dunes that have whispered secrets for millennia. Cut to the lush Congo basin, rain pounding on emerald leaves, rivers carving paths through untamed wilderness. Now, zoom to a bustling market in Lagos, where vendors hawk spices and fabrics under a relentless sun. This is Africa, cradle of humanity, vault of the world's richest mineral hoards, 30% of global reserves, from cobalt to coltan, diamonds to oil. Yet as the camera pans to a child sifting dirt for scraps in a Kinshasa slum, the paradox sharpens. A continent that birthed civilization now cradles the planet's deepest poverty. In 2025, sub-Saharan Africa's GDP per capita hovers at a mere $1,700, less than half the global average, while 35% of its people scrape by on under $1.90 a day. How does such abundance fuel such want? The answer lies not in the land's bounty, but in the chains forged centuries ago, links that bind tighter with each passing decade. Long before the hum of European steamships pierced African shores, the continent pulsed with ingenuity and trade. Empires like Mali and Songhai commanded trans-Saharan caravans laden with salt, gold, and ivory, their universities in Timbuktu rivaling Europe's finest. But the 15th century brought shadows. Portuguese vessels probing West African coasts, not for partnership, but plunder. By the 1880s, the scramble for Africa erupted in smoke-filled Berlin conference rooms, where kings and statesmen diced the continent like a map on a gambler's table. No African voices echoed in those halls. Borders sliced through ethnic heartlands, lumping rivals into fragile mosaics. Over 170 ethnic groups crammed into nations like Nigeria, seeds of tomorrow's strife sown in ink. Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, they carved fiefdoms, extracting rubber from Congo's whips, ivory from East Africa's tusks, gold from South Africa's veins. Economies bent to the metropolis's will. Raw materials out, finished goods in at extortionate markups. Infrastructure? Rail lines funneled ore to ports, not people to markets. Education? Reserved for clerks to tally the spoils. This was no benevolent tutelage. It was a machine designed for drain, leaving soils scarred and societies splintered. The turning points came swift and brutal. In the Congo Free State, King Leopold II's private empire from 1885 to 1908 claimed 10 million lives, hands severed for unmet rubber quotas, villages razed in reprisal. Belgium's handover in 1908 barely softened the grip. Forced labor persisted, turning a resource paradise into a pauper's hell. Across the Atlantic trade's grim echo, the transatlantic slave trade had already hollowed the demographic core, shipping 12 million souls to fuel New World plantations, shattering kinship networks and trust. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, independence waves crashed from Ghana in 1957 to Angola in 1975. Jubilation masked the hangover. New flags flew over hollowed husks. Economies wired for export, not equity. Cold War proxies ignited infernos. US-backed Mobutu in Zaire siphoned billions while his people starved. Soviet-armed MPLA in Angola locked in a 27-year civil war, diamonds and oil greasing rebel rifles. The 1970s oil shocks boomed petrodollars into Nigeria and Angola, only to evaporate in corruption's maw. $400 billion vanished in Nigeria alone over 5 decades, per its own anti-graft probes. Borders, drawn in disregard, erupted. Biafra's secession bid in 1967 claimed 3 million. Rwanda's 1994 genocide, 800,000. Each fracture widened the chasm, diverting scant resources from schools to soldiers. Beneath these convulsions lurks a machinery of misfortune, the resource curse that turns gems to graves. Africa's trove, 40% of global gold, 78% of platinum, vast oil fields should be salvation. Instead, it breeds volatility. Commodity prices swing like pendulums, oil at $145 a barrel in 2008, crashing to $60 months later, gutting budgets from Luanda to Lagos. Governments, flush then famished, neglect diversification. Manufacturing, Africa's Achilles heel, at under 10% of GDP, withers as Dutch disease inflates currencies, pricing local goods out of markets. Worse, plenty invites predation. In Sierra Leone, blood diamonds bankrolled a decade-long war, amputations in child soldiers the toll. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, with $24 trillion in minerals, logs a GDP per capita of $1,900. Its coltan and cobalt fueling global gadgets while militias clash in shadowed forests, displacing millions. Angola's oil, 99% of exports, enriched elites, 70% of its people linger in poverty. This is no accident of nature. Weak institutions, colonial relics, prone to capture by warlords or kleptocrats, channel rents to Swiss vaults, not village wells. Foreign firms from De Beers to Exxon ink lopsided deals, minimal royalties, tax havens galore. The curse compounds. Booms breed corruption, busts breed unrest, locking nations in low-trust traps where investment flees and brains drain. The ghost of empire didn't dissolve at midnight on Independence Eve. It morphed into neo-colonial specters, subtler but no less strangling. Structural adjustment programs, IMF and World Bank's elixirs of the 1980s, demanded austerity for loans, slash subsidies, privatized state firms, open markets to imports that swamped local industries. Ghana, once food exporter, imported rice by the barge load. Zambia's copper mines sold cheap to multinationals, left workers jobless. Debt, that Faustian pact, spirals eternal. In 2025, Africa's external tab hit $685 billion, service alone gobbling $88 billion, more than health and education combined. Sudan's debt-to-GDP ratio, 252%. Interest rates, 9.8% for Africa versus 0.8% for Germany. Creditors, China's belts, Western banks, hoard leverage. Zambia's 2020 default drags into paralysis, creditor committees bickering geopolitically. Climate change, the uninvited reaper, amplifies the snare. Erratic rains parch Sahel farms, floods ravage Mozambique, costs uninsurable in a warming world built by northern emitters. Yet aid trickles, $50 billion yearly, dwarfed by outflows, $88 billion in illicit financial flows, $40 billion in profit repatriation. Geography, too, conspires. Sahara barriers, tsetse flies, few navigable rivers, isolating interiors from trade. The result? A self-perpetuating vice. Poverty begets conflict. Conflict begets flight. Flight begets hollowed states. Today, in boardrooms from Davos to Dakar, the stakes pulse with human urgency. A youth bulge, 60% under 25, could ignite innovation or inferno. Instead, 20% unemployment festers in townships and teeming cities. HIV ravages southern corridors. Malaria claims 200 million cases yearly, diverting billions from growth. Yet glimmers pierce the gloom. Ethiopia's factories hum with Chinese partnerships. Rwanda's tech hubs draw Silicon Valley eyes. The African Continental Free Trade Area, launched 2019, whispers of intra-African commerce rising from 18% to potential parity with Europe's 15%. But without rupture, debt jubilees, fair trade pacts, green funds that repay climate debts, these are flickers in a gale. In Kinshasa's markets, vendors like Amina, mother of four, haggle for maize prices that climb with every global hiccup. Her children, bright-eyed but barefoot, dream of schools shuttered by austerity. Across the continent, 600 million souls, half Africa's people, know hunger's bite, not from scarcity, but from systems that hoard the feast. As the sun dips over Table Mountain, casting long shadows on Cape Town's harbors, once gateways for empire's loot, we confront the revelation. Africa's poverty isn't fate, but forgery, forged in Berlin's rapacity,